Large Birds, Spiders and Mom is the first episode of the 5th season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by Ted Wass, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And I think this is a pretty strong way of starting off the 5th season. It establishes that Jake is going to junior high and Charlie has a rash problem. So I'll go through things pretty much chronologically. I don't have many extensive thoughts on this. I don't really have any quotes to share, but in general, I really enjoyed it. I may not have too much to say, but it's still a lot of fun. It starts off in the kitchen, Charlie asking Berta about how she washes his underwear, and it turns out he has a rash in the groin area, and at random points throughout the episode, Charlie just starts rubbing himself up against different things, and it's pretty good fun because it happens at kind of random moments, and I thought it worked really well. Jake, we learn, is starting junior high, and Alan gives him his first mobile phone for emergencies only, and they basically start to tell him, I feel like it started out innocently as just telling Jake, you might need the phone just in case. And then basically Alan shares all of the horrible things that happened to him when he was Jake's age, with bullies doing horrible things to him. And it scared Jake. And it very briefly took me back to just before starting secondary school, when you hear of all of these horrible things the big kids will do to you. And none of it's true, though I do imagine there are some bullies. And Jake is understandably terrified. And we then go shopping. We have quite a few different locations here. We're in the shoe store, and Jake has to wear some not stylish shoes because they're less likely to be stolen, and he's wearing some beige clothing because it's less likely to be associated with a gang. And then they're in line to buy these things. And first of all, there's a problem with a man cutting in line, and Alan says a few things to him and ultimately lets him stay in front because he's quite menacing. And then this woman walks by and Charlie says hello to her, and he knows her by name, and it turns out it's the man's wife. So that was a really awkward moment, and honestly something I'm surprised doesn't happen more often with Charlie, but I quite enjoyed that moment there. And then we're actually walking outside, which almost never happens in any sitcom. It's very rare to be outdoors, just obviously because it's easier to film indoors in a set, and Jake is walking to the bus stop and he's getting on the bus and he walks on the bus, and as the bus pulls away we just see him pressed up against the glass, absolutely terrified. It sounds heartbreaking, but it is very funny. And honestly, there's not too much of the episode left. I've basically covered a lot of what happens. And then in the last few scenes, I think we get some pretty good messages and a lot of comedy as well. Charlie's on the phone to presumably the doctor's receptionist, and then Alan comes home and he phones Judith to see how Jake's first day of school was, and he hasn't come home yet. So he decides to phone Jake's mobile, and we hear it ringing. It's in the house. And very quickly we establish that Jake is also in the house, and they obviously find him in his room, and he explains that he got off the bus, got on another bus and come home, and it was because he was too scared. And I think there's a really strong lesson there. Yes, prepare your child for things that might happen at school, but don't terrify them, because there's absolutely no benefit to that. I think it's a balancing act of preparing them, but not making them fear things that might not actually happen. And they do have a nice sit-down conversation, the three of them, and talking about doing things even if they scare you, and getting over that and getting past that. And Jake asks how they do it, and Charlie says that he drinks, which makes a lot of sense. And they're taking Jake back home, and the way this scene played out is just fantastic. They're taking Jake home in the car, and they're stuck in traffic, so Alan honks his horn and he goes to get out to confront the person in front because they're being quite aggressive, and they're, that he's showing Jake that he's facing his fear. He won't let fear control him, and it seems like Charlie was going to get out with him, but instead he let Alan go out and locked the door behind him, and Alan is just being thrown around, and there's this one moment where he's kind of thrown against the window and then dragged across it, and it's beautifully executed, very, very well done. And then we cut to the hospital, where Alan is getting all of his battered and bruised body parts tended to, and Charlie gets his rash looked at. And the doctor has a good comment about putting a tuxedo on a goat. It's still a goat. And it was a nice way to end things, quite an entertaining final scene. So it definitely feels like quite a quick episode. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of variety, which is fine. It doesn't have to have a great variety of things going on. It's more of an observation than anything else. I think it's a good way to start off the season, establishing Jake's age, helping to show that Jake is growing up. And I think that the comedy is definitely very strong in a lot of scenes. I think personal highlights would have to be Jake when he was pressed up against the bus window. I just thought it looked brilliant. And, well, Alan getting thrown across the window. Not a great day for people in windows, but I certainly liked those moments. And just the image of Charlie randomly rubbing himself up against things, because it kind of just happened in little unexpected ways. And I thought that was very well done. This is definitely a solid way to start off the season. I thought Large Birds, Spiders and Mom was a pretty great beginning to season 5 of 2.5 Men.